In the quiet town of Grand Junction, Colorado, a seemingly perfect family's life is shattered overnight. Jennifer and Abby Blagg vanish without a trace, leaving behind a blood-soaked crime scene and a devastated husband and father, Michael Blagg. But as investigators dig deeper, they uncover a web of secrets, lies, and hidden desires. Was it a tragic home invasion gone wrong? Or did the picture-perfect family man have a darker side? With twists at every turn, conflicting evidence, and a daughter still missing after 2 decades, the Blagg family case continues to baffle investigators and true crime enthusiasts alike. Join us as we unravel the mysterious disappearance of Jennifer and Abby Blagg and the controversial conviction of Michael Blagg. Is justice truly served, or is an innocent man behind bars? Tune in to this gripping episode of our True Crime podcast and decide for yourself. Hey everyone, welcome to another True Crime podcast on the True Crime Explained channel. Today, we're diving into the story of the Blagg family, also known as the story of Jennifer and Abby Blagg. Let's begin. Jennifer Blagg, born Jennifer Lohman, came into the world in January 1967 in southern Oklahoma. Her parents were Roy and Merlin Lohman, and she had an older brother, David, who was 3 years her senior. The Lohmans' marriage was far from a happy one. Roy had struggled with alcohol even before tying the knot, and shortly after Jennifer's birth, he began working for the police force. As Roy climbed the career ladder, it seemed his drinking problem was under control. However, the marriage eventually fell apart, and the children ended up living with their mother, Merlin. After the divorce, Roy remarried a woman named Linda. This new marriage appeared happy and normal until Roy's death. Following her parents' split, Jennifer cut off contact with her father, and their relationship gradually faded away. It wasn't until years later, as an adult, that Jennifer would reveal that her father had physically abused her as a child. Roy had either hidden this well, or genuinely changed, because when family and friends encountered him years later, he seemed like a completely different person. Jennifer only reconnected with him shortly before his death. But let's return to the chronological events of Jennifer's childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood. Jennifer's father wasn't in the picture. Rumors circulated at school that she had confided in a few friends about sexual abuse by her father, but this was never confirmed, even by Jennifer herself, so it's not considered official information. The family of 3, Merlin and her kids, David and Jennifer, were incredibly close-knit. Merlin, who became the head of the household and took on the father figure role, fondly recalled Sunday mornings when the 3 of them would gather to watch TV together. Jennifer's high school classmates in Oklahoma described her as one of the most popular and well-liked girls in school. She was like someone straight out of a TV show or a book. She had it all. Beautiful, smart, and kind. Jennifer had tons of friends and was involved in many extracurricular activities. Her classmates often pointed out these qualities. As a high schooler, Jennifer was active in both soccer and basketball. She was also a member of the cheerleading squad and the jazz group. In one interview, her brother would remember her like this. She was a typical young lady who did everything normal girls her age do. She was very social, went to church, and had many boyfriends. Jennifer also had lots of friends she liked to talk to on the phone. She was an ordinary teenager in every way. After finishing high school, Jennifer enrolled at Oklahoma State University. But homesickness started to bother her during her first year, so she transferred to San Diego to be closer to her mother. Her mum, once the kids were grown, had started dating and met a man who would become her husband. His name was Harold Conway, and that's who Merlin moved in with when Jennifer was in college. Living in San Diego, Jennifer began studying at the local university, and that's where she met Michael Blagg. The couple met through mutual friends because at that time, Jennifer's best friend was dating Michael's best friend, so their meeting was bound to happen. Their first encounter was at a party, and Mark later passed his phone number to his friend, who then gave it to Jennifer. Their first date took place in July 1990. The couple went to see a movie, then had dinner at a Japanese restaurant, and later watched fireworks for the 4th of July. From that moment on, as friends of the couple recalled, Jennifer and Michael were inseparable. Michael was born in 1963, so he was 4 years older than Jennifer. He was born in Texas, and his parents were John and Elizabeth. The person who had the biggest impact on Michael's life was his father, John. John was a colonel specializing in aviation. After a few years, he decided to partially change his job and became a military judge advocate general. Due to the nature of John's work, the family moved around a lot, from base to base. When John was still a child, they lived in Georgia for a while, then in Hawaii, and finally, the family settled in Georgia, near Atlanta. As a teenager, he really enjoyed sports. After graduating high school, he started college and earned a degree in nuclear engineering. After finishing college, wanting to follow in his father's footsteps, he joined the military and was transferred to Pensacola, Florida. There he learned to fly helicopters and saw his future in that. Around that time, in the mid-80s, Michael met his first wife, who isn't named. The marriage lasted a year and fell apart, according to Michael, because of his work. In the 80s, just like his father many years before, Michael was transferred from base to base. His wife couldn't imagine such a life, didn't want to move with him regularly every few months, so ultimately, the couple jointly decided to divorce. The divorce proceedings didn't last long since the couple had neither a house nor children. There are also some suggestions and indications that the breakdown of Michael's marriage might have resulted from his affairs. Because years later, when the man would talk to one of the investigators, he'd say, "Listen, I had a lot of fun when I was in the military. Lots of drinking and stuff like that. I did a lot of stupid things, but luckily I managed to escape from them." When asked if he dated other women, he answered, "Yes, I had a lot of girlfriends, and I drank a lot." So this alcohol problem appeared, which was visible earlier in Jennifer's father. Michael was previously an atheist, or a non-practicing believer, but according to him, he converted in 1987. After finalizing his divorce, he continued working in the military, moving from base to base, and was stationed in San Diego when he met Jennifer. That's where their first meeting took place. The relationship developed very quickly, and the wedding happened just a year later, in November 1991, in Michael's hometown in Texas. Jennifer was 24 at the time, and her husband was 28. Among her girlfriends, she was the last one to find a husband. But, as friends explained, this was because Jennifer wanted to find the right, perfect man she had always dreamed of. She was willing to wait, and one day Michael appeared in her life, and she knew he was the one. Her friend recalled that Jennifer was looking for a wonderful person, a family-oriented Christian who could be a provider and have children. Regarding faith, Jennifer was raised in a traditional Christian family, but she didn't have a burning faith herself until she turned 14. According to what she told her friends, between elementary and high school, she converted, and from then on became a warrior of God, as she described herself. Faith was a priority for her, which is partly why she searched so long for the right man. She wanted to make sure her future husband would believe in the same things she did and share the same values. She wanted to create a traditional family model. That is, the man would be the provider, the protector, taking care of her and the children, while she would take care of the home and raise the children. You could say she wanted to create the family she never had, because her father left his children and wife and disappeared from the family portrait, which undoubtedly influenced the shaping of Jennifer's personality. After the wedding in 1991, Jennifer and Michael decided to wait before starting a family. Michael traveled a lot due to his work, but didn't want to put his career on hold. Jennifer got pregnant in 1994, 3 years after the wedding. Michael was absent for most of the pregnancy because he was on a cruise. He quit his military job shortly before the birth in 1995. The couple's daughter, Abby Jo Blagg, was born in March 1995. The pregnancy was extremely difficult for Jennifer. It was high risk, and doctors didn't give her very good odds. Jennifer, whose health began to decline during the pregnancy, started using all possible measures. In the end, Abby was born without any complications. After leaving the military, Michael started working as an engineer, and the couple lived in South Carolina. Jennifer loved living in South Carolina. She loved the climate there, which suited her. She was close to her mother. She found friends with whom she shared good and bad times. And that's where she imagined spending the rest of her life. After Abby's birth, still in the 90s, Jennifer started keeping a journal. Thanks to this, we know what happened in specific months, what Jennifer's situation was, how she felt, and what was going on in the Blagg family's life. In 1999, Jennifer started mentioning in her journal that she and Michael were considering moving to Arizona. She and her husband, as she wrote, prayed a lot about this matter, and she decided to leave this decision in God's hands. The move to Phoenix, Arizona, was supposed to be related to Michael's new job. At that time, Michael wasn't earning a small amount, over $6,000. But the couple had very high expenses, and besides, as Michael recalled years later, he and his wife often argued about renting a house. Jennifer's dream was to own a home. But at that time, it wasn't possible. Michael couldn't afford it, but something could change, like his job. This way, he could earn more and afford to buy a house. But when Michael got a job offer in Arizona for $10,000 a month, Jennifer started to back out. She didn't want to leave South Carolina, because that's where she wanted to live. Everything important in her life was right there. In 1999, according to her journal, arguments were frequent. Michael wanted to leave, Jennifer didn't, and that was the cause of their fights. Over time, Jennifer started feeling worse mentally, which was evident in her entries. She mentioned arguments, that she didn't like herself, that she was sick, and the next day, she'd write that she loved God for all his mercy and for giving her a wonderful husband. Meanwhile, something happened that impacted her life. Her father, with whom she had regained contact after many years, was very seriously ill. Still in 1999, Jennifer managed to visit him and say goodbye. A few days later, the funeral took place, and Michael and Abby, being in a different state, didn't attend. For Jennifer, her father's death was a huge blow. For almost her entire life, she had held resentment and grudges against him for leaving the family when she was still a child. And suddenly, when she managed to regain contact and everything seemed to be getting better, her father fell ill and died. So certain issues were never resolved, and Jennifer suffered because her father wasn't in her life. Harold, her mother's second husband, appeared in her life when she was already an adult. She never treated him as a father, so there was no one to take on that role. For this reason, she was almost desperately dependent on Michael creating an ideal family with them. She transferred her expectations of her father onto her husband. She wanted him to be everything her father couldn't be. She had huge expectations of him. She wanted a picture-perfect family. She wanted Abby to grow up in a complete family. And this pursuit of a dream, of an ideal, was something that led to a mental breakdown, which in turn led to depression. Jennifer was still unsure whether she should move to Arizona with her family. She prayed for an answer every day and feared that Abby, who was 4 at the time, would start asking her parents for a brother or sister. Moreover, as she revealed in her journal, she and Michael were having financial problems. The matter was about to be referred to a collection agency. Jennifer wanted to discuss this issue with Michael, but she felt, as she wrote, that Michael was always busy with something else. He didn't spend time with her, didn't respond to her emails. In short, he wasn't who she wanted him to be when she married him, so she did what she always did in such moments. She turned to God. She wrote that the voice of the Lord was pure and quiet, and her ears, eyes, and heart were completely turned towards him. She thanked God for many sincere friends and wrote that she felt blessed to have such a wonderful daughter and a loving husband. She asked for an answer to her questions about moving. And it seems the answers came. They came quickly because Michael accepted the job offer and the family moved to Arizona. Jennifer's husband, the head of the family, started working for a jet engine manufacturing company. There were few journal entries at that time, but many indications suggested the marriage was in crisis. Talks of separation began to appear, but ultimately, Michael and Jennifer wanted to fix their relationship and decided to return to South Carolina. There, Jennifer was supposed to feel happier. In her journal, she indicated that once again, when the family lived in Arizona, Michael's drinking problem resurfaced. The battle with addiction was difficult, lasting many years and beginning before Michael met his wife. But as he said, he really wanted to change. So back in South Carolina, he started regularly attending church with Jennifer. He worked for the same company as in Phoenix, manufacturing jet engines, just in a different branch. The move was supposed to be the beginning of another, happier chapter, And it was. It seemed that the marriage was slowly overcoming the crisis, and from that moment on, things would only get better. Michael became active in the church, and he and Jennifer formed a special prayer group that operated 24 hours a day and was dedicated to people in difficult situations. The Blaggs often advised local couples going through crises. These couples had no idea that Jennifer and Michael, giving such good advice, were struggling with many problems themselves, but didn't want to show it. Things were definitely better in the Blagg family home, although sometimes arguments still occurred due to financial troubles. The dream of owning their own home appeared on the horizon from time to time, so Michael again began to consider changing jobs. The couple was living in Simpsonville, South Carolina at the time, and all the houses were so expensive that the Blaggs couldn't afford to buy one. Nevertheless, Jennifer seemed happier, leading a women's Bible study, while Michael began teaching, inspiring other believers with his story. All problems were kept secret and were never to see the light of day. Michael was having problems at work because his boss wasn't satisfied with his achievements. That's partly why he started looking for a new job. Meanwhile, wanting to meet the expectations imposed on him, he spent more and more time at work. This led to conflicts because Jennifer noticed that her husband was home less and less often. In her journal, Jennifer began to indicate that perhaps her husband wasn't so perfect. She realized at some point how dependent she was on him. To friends and family, it looked as if the Blaggs were one person. They were a harmonious couple, and maybe for a while they were. But over time, Jennifer began to realize that the roles she had imposed, that Michael should be a good father, the head of the family, the breadwinner, and she should be a good mother taking care of the home, were a golden cage for her. And Michael was no longer caring and nurturing. He became despotic and controlling. The family traveled everywhere together. To friends, it looked as if Michael and Jennifer enjoyed spending time in each other's company, but Jennifer knew what it really looked like. And she didn't admit it to anyone. She only wrote about it in her diary. She never parted from Michael because he wouldn't let her go out alone. Friends recalled that there was one moment when they realized something was wrong in this marriage. It was an ordinary day. Michael was at work, and Jennifer was sitting with her friends in the living room. Everything was fine, until she looked at the clock. Then she shouted that Michael would soon be back from work, and nothing was ready. As she explained to the guests, every time the man came back from work, dinner had to be waiting for him. Otherwise, he would fly into a rage. So Jennifer started running around in a panic and said she had to go to the store because if she didn't, and if dinner wasn't waiting for Michael, it would end in a huge fight. She told the guests to leave because she was afraid her husband would be angry. He wouldn't like seeing someone in the house in his absence. Michael went away for a few weeks looking for a new job at the turn of 1999 and 2000. He returned to South Carolina, explaining to Jennifer that there were no prospects in Ohio, where he had been looking for work. Jennifer's health began to decline at that time, partly because she was stressed about Michael's work, and partly because a cyst was discovered in her in 2000. Her husband, to comfort her, bought her a minivan at that time, but the situation was becoming more serious, and Jennifer had her uterus removed in 2000. It was a devastating event for both her and her husband. Although Michael had undergone a vasectomy after Abby's birth, he and Jennifer sometimes talked about having a second child. But Jennifer treated this, like many other things, as a message from God. So when Michael received a job offer in Colorado in 2000, she didn't hesitate for a moment. She felt this move would change a lot, and she wasn't wrong. The Blagg family moved to Grand Junction in 2000, a city of about 65,000 residents at the beginning of the 2000s. It was the largest city in western Colorado. Surrounded by orchards, vineyards, and climbing routes, Jennifer hoped they would eventually settle in there, just like they had in South Carolina. The house rented by the Blagg family was on a quiet street at Pine Terrace Court. Michael started working as an operations director for the local Dixon Amatech manufacturing plant. He had a higher position with more responsibilities, but also more time to spend with his family. His promotion came with a pay raise. During that period, Michael started earning $110,000 annually, which meant he was making over $9,000 a month. But as he said in a conversation with one of the investigators, he wasn't bringing those $9,000 home. After deducting rent, bills, and other expenses, he was left with about $2,500. He and Jennifer were saving several thousand each month with the dream of buying their own home. For the first few weeks, the Blaggs tried to find their footing in the new reality. Jennifer and Michael started looking for a suitable church, wanting to start a prayer circle or get involved in the church in other ways, as they had done in South Carolina. 2 weeks after moving, in May 2000, Jennifer met new friends at church. She had never had trouble making new acquaintances and began participating in activities led by church members. A few weeks after moving, she started working as a volunteer teacher at a school. According to her journal, she worked there on Tuesdays and Thursdays and wasn't interested in the money. She wanted to teach children. But just a few weeks after moving, in June 2000, problems started to appear. Jennifer wrote in her journal in the evenings that Michael, despite promising to spend more time with the family after the move, had even more responsibilities as a director, causing him to stay at work until evening. Writing about her well-being and describing her role as a mother, Jennifer summed it up in one sentence: "I feel hopeless." She spent most of her time at home with her daughter, waiting for her husband. She was just getting to know the neighbors, so she didn't have anyone to talk to honestly, and arguments between her and Abby often occurred. Abby was an extremely spontaneous and lively child. Jennifer, on the other hand, was a perfectionist. She wanted everything to be perfect, so it was an explosive combination. During that period, Jennifer started writing down Bible quotes daily and referring to them, trying to compare her life to situations from the scripture. She found comfort and peace in this. Among all other things, she valued contact with her mother, who lived in Texas at the time, and her brother, who lived in Oklahoma, the most. Since college, Jennifer had been in daily contact with her mother and could count on her in any situation. She was a huge support for her. Although as time passed, these problems became increasingly larger, new friends and neighbors of the Blagg family described the family as seeming happy and normal. Abby exhibited an extroverted nature like her mother, often talking to strangers, which made her adored. And the reverend from the new church described the Blagg family as that ideal, picture-perfect family everyone dreams of. Jennifer once again showed a character trait that had been visible throughout her life. She showed that she preferred to deal with other people's problems rather than her own. After moving to Grand Junction, she and Mike started creating what they called a warrior prayer group. They invited believers who wanted to confront their problems rather than avoid them. During meetings, they compared God to a grapevine and themselves, as believers, to branches. It could be described as a Christian support group because Jennifer and Michael really wanted to help the faithful. They wanted to solve their problems more than the interested parties themselves. As a result, as Jennifer later wrote in her journal, she sometimes felt superior to others, and she felt tremendous anger inside because people didn't want to work on their problems. Just before moving to Colorado, Jennifer's health had started to return to normal, but after the move, it began to deteriorate again. Jennifer had problems with her reproductive organs and even accidentally overdosed on medication prescribed by her doctor. She went to the hospital for a stomach pump, and after this event, her mental state suddenly began to worsen. She wrote, "I am very depressed, weary, heartbroken, and confused." She began to doubt her faith and questioned the existence of God. Michael couldn't understand why Jennifer was unhappy. She was active in the church, raising their daughter, taking care of the home. They were saving money together to buy a house, and yet she felt unhappy and wanted to return to South Carolina. Things started getting worse, as confirmed by her journal entries. Here's one quote from 2001. "I must stop lying to make others feel good. I'm sowing seeds of discouragement and reaping fruitless harvests. No one is perfect, so why do I want others to see me as flawless?" Jennifer and Michael's 10th wedding anniversary was approaching in 2001. Feeling that her marriage was slowly, irreversibly falling apart, Jennifer wrote a letter to her husband, expressing her feelings. She wanted to rekindle the feeling that had connected them years ago. She ended the letter with the words, "I am your beloved wife who adores you. Thank you for being my husband and for loving me the way you do. I will be waiting for you at home with open arms and an open heart. All my love is yours. Jennifer, your wife. In October 2001, Jennifer started feeling even worse. She and Michael were concerned about her condition, and as she admitted, it was caused by the move to Colorado. She hoped to return to South Carolina within the next year. Despite giving advice to others in church, she didn't feel like the right person in the right position. She couldn't handle the problems she didn't discuss with anyone. She felt that during meetings, others weren't praying fervently enough, not like her. And a moment later, she felt guilty for feeling superior to others. It was a vicious cycle she couldn't escape. New friends from Colorado noticed her worsening mood, but when they asked what was wrong, she just shrugged. She wasn't ready, or maybe she couldn't talk about it. In early November 2001, Jennifer told her husband she was going on a trip with Abby. They were supposed to see canyons, deserts, typical landscapes for the state. But in reality, they went to meet with appropriate services, because Jennifer, as she said, wanted to free herself from her toxic and controlling husband. That day, Jennifer drove to a service office in another city, so her husband wouldn't find out, and she was supposed to meet with one of the workers there. Upon arrival, it turned out there weren't enough staff for Jennifer to meet with anyone that day, and she was asked to leave her phone number. The woman was very agitated. People who witnessed this situation that day recalled that she seemed frightened. But then, in November 2001, nothing was resolved, and Jennifer returned with Abby from their trip to Grand Junction. Journal entries indicate that on November 9, 2001, there was a serious argument between Jennifer and Michael. There's no information about what caused the argument or what happened later, but Jennifer was very hurt. Michael would later explain that it wasn't an argument, just an exchange of words, and it was about Jennifer being bothered by Michael calling her when he was at work. Chronologically, 2 days after the argument, on November 11, 2001, Jennifer's last journal entry appeared. It read, "Jesus holds the key to life and death. He knows when you'll be born and die, but he also left us keys. The key to health, finances, relationships, desires. I must give him all these keys. And I also had some time to pray. I prayed and was given the keys to health and the future. He reached out to me and I handed him the keys. Maybe I'll have to do this every day, but for today, he has the keys. And I have peace. Thank you, Father." Jennifer felt sick that day, and as she recalled, still felt irritation and bitterness from the argument. That's why Mike went to church alone with their daughter Abby, while Jennifer stayed home. This was a deviation from the norm, and even other church members started asking if something was wrong. Abby told her Sunday school teacher that her mum and dad had recently argued about something. That day, while Michael and Abby went to church and then for a walk, Jennifer was reading a book about faith. Between the lines, she wrote, "I argued with Mike on Friday. Unexpectedly fell ill this weekend. Michael and I had a serious conversation about our lack of effective communication. I feel scared, numb, frustrated, and almost desperate. Lord, tell me how to pray for Mike, for myself, and for our marriage." Abby and Jennifer were last seen at the Blagg family home by neighbours between 3 and 3:30 p.m. on November 12, 2001. According to Mike's testimony, around 7 p.m., Abby went to bed, and an hour later, around 8 p.m., Jennifer talked with a neighbour on the phone and arranged to meet for lunch the next day. The Blaggs went to bed around 10 p.m. According to Mike, nothing happened during the night hours. On November 13th, the next day, the man got up for work as he did every morning. He woke up around 5:30 a.m. and left the house around 6 a.m. Both Jennifer and her daughter Abby were asleep at this time. This wasn't unusual, as Jennifer and Abby usually got up together around 6:30 a.m., and that's when Jennifer would get her daughter ready for school. After arriving at work, Michael usually called them around 7 a.m. to see if they were up. It was the same that day. Michael called around 7 a.m., then when Jennifer didn't answer, he called again at 7:05 a.m. This didn't raise his suspicions because his wife often rushed to get their daughter ready for school and sometimes didn't answer the phone. But she always called back, and they would talk for about 15-20 minutes about what she planned to do that day. So when Jennifer didn't call back after 7 a.m., Michael started to worry. After meeting with a client, he called his wife again around 10 a.m., but Jennifer didn't answer then either. Michael was directed to the answering machine and left a message saying he was worried and asking his wife to call back. The man grew increasingly anxious, so around 4 p.m., he left work early and drove home. He had Thanksgiving or Christmas presents with him and intended to hide them before his daughter could see them. So when he crossed the threshold, he called out, "I'm home," and hid the presents in the closet, expecting Abby to run up to him and throw herself around his neck. She always did that, but this day was different. Dead silence greeted him at home. When he crossed the threshold of the front door, he noticed that the back door leading to the garden was open. Other signs indicated that someone had broken in. He headed upstairs to the master bedroom. In the bedroom, Jennifer's purse and all its contents were lying on the floor. Next to it was an empty jewelry box. But that's not what Michael noticed first. The bed caught his attention. The bedding was crumpled, one pillow was missing, and the others were scattered. Jennifer was nowhere to be seen, and there was blood on the bed. It was dripping onto the floor and had started to congeal. A large pool of blood had formed on the floor next to the bed. There was no other evidence besides this. Michael didn't check the other rooms. He went downstairs, grabbed the phone, and dialed 911. The call was made around 4:20 p.m. The emergency operator asked what happened. Michael replied, "Oh my God, it's in the house." When asked what happened, he answered, "I just got home from work, and there's blood everywhere. On the bed, on the floor. My family's not here. My daughter and wife aren't here." After providing basic information describing the scene and the victims, Michael was asked by the operator to go to the garage to check if his wife's car was inside. During the conversation, Michael confirmed that the minivan he had bought for his wife was in the garage. He went outside and was supposed to wait there for emergency services because there was a risk someone might still be in the house. However, when the operator started asking about what happened to his daughter, whether she had gone to school that day, Michael replied that he didn't know and realized he hadn't checked her room, so he went back into the house. But there was no trace of Abby. Her school uniform, which she wore every day, was folded in her room, suggesting she never had the chance to put it on. The bedding was pulled back and rumpled, as if someone had gotten out of bed. There was no blood anywhere, no signs of an accident. After the struggle, the only suspicious element was a running fan. It was November. It was cold outside, so the operator immediately considered the running fan strange. Responders arrived at the scene 17 minutes after the call was made, at 4:37 p.m. Michael was waiting in front of the house, and when one of the officers asked how he was feeling, he replied, "Not too good." Then the officer asked him to hand over the key to the front door, and that's how he got inside. From the very beginning, based on the bloodstain found in the bedroom, the place was treated as a crime scene. That's why all officers put on latex gloves and were careful not to destroy any evidence. This could prove crucial in solving this mystery, and it probably was in this case, because there was very little evidence in this criminal case. And if the investigators hadn't been particularly careful, it's possible that this evidence would have been destroyed during the police's first visit. No blood was found in any room other than the master bedroom. The investigators encountered the same scene and noticed the same things Michael had over half an hour earlier. In the couple's bedroom, on the floor right next to the bed, there was an empty jewelry box, suggesting a break-in because the intruder had taken the valuables. But nothing besides the jewelry had been stolen. Money kept in the master bedroom was still there. The most important clue was the pool of blood right next to the bed. Experts who arrived at the scene, just seeing this trace, suggested that the blood had been there for at least several hours. Based on this evidence, a preliminary conclusion was drawn that the break-in or attack occurred shortly after Michael left for work. Despite a thorough search, no bodies were found in the house. There weren't even traces of Jennifer or Abby's presence. The girl hadn't gone to school that day, which was confirmed after contacting the school. Her uniform was folded, suggesting that the girl was either killed or kidnapped before she started getting ready for school. What raised the most doubts about Abby's disappearance was that the school had contacted Michael and hadn't informed him that his daughter hadn't shown up at school. According to the teacher's testimony, someone had contacted him the previous day, November 12th, and said that Abby wouldn't be at school the next day. However, There was no information about who had contacted this teacher. It was probably a man, but it couldn't be determined whether it was the girl's father, Michael. While searching the house, as detectives would later explain, experts felt that it didn't look like a break-in, despite the fact that they couldn't exactly point out what led to this conclusion. Many pieces of evidence were missing. Jewelry was stolen, but money was left behind. No one had broken in. Only the back door was open. There were no signs of a struggle, no DNA was found, and the most troubling of all was the fact that bloodstains were found only in the bedroom. Based on this evidence, it can be assumed that the woman was attacked while sleeping or when she got up. The type of stain and lack of splatter suggested that the perpetrator shot Jennifer. But if she was shot and taken out of the house, alive or not, why weren't there any traces found in other rooms? Given the amount of blood, it can be assumed that the woman was bleeding heavily, yet there wasn't a drop of Jennifer's blood anywhere in the house outside the bedroom. So how did she leave the house? The garage was also checked because during the conversation with the emergency operator, Michael said his wife's car was still in the garage. During the first search, luminol wasn't used, and only small blood splatters visible to the naked eye were discovered. Traces were secured on the back seat and the driver's seat. Small amounts of blood were also found on the clutch pedal, raising the question of whether the driver was Jennifer trying to escape or the perpetrator. At that stage, it was already known that the woman had been in the car at some point after the attack, but what happened to her afterward? The only explanation, not very logical, but the only one for the investigators, was that after shooting Jennifer, the perpetrator took her and Abby somewhere and then returned the car to the garage. But looking at it more closely, it didn't make sense. If there had been a break-in, the perpetrator would have taken valuables. More traces would have been found. And if it had been a kidnapping for ransom, the perpetrator would have left a message. For this purpose, the answering machine in the Blagg family home was checked, but only messages left by Michael when he was at work were found. During the conversation with Michael, one of the investigators noticed that the man seemed scared, very nervous, in a word, shaken. Considering all the events that had occurred in the Blagg family home, this behaviour wasn't suspicious. On the same day, a search warrant for the house was obtained, and a thorough analysis was conducted. Transparent liquid drops were then found on the floor, in the hallway, and in the living room. The examination couldn't determine what kind of liquid it was, so it can only be assumed that it was some kind of cleaning agent. The master bedroom, where most evidence was found, was examined with luminol, and blood traces were discovered, including splatters on the corner of the bed. There were no blood traces in other parts of the house. They only appeared in the garage, on the exterior of the car. But based on these traces, it wasn't possible to establish a sensible sequence of events. Even if only Jennifer was injured, why weren't there traces in other parts of the house when the body or live Jennifer was being moved to the car? More and more elements suggested that the perpetrator tried to cover up traces. In addition to the transparent liquid stains on the floor, near the garage, in the living room, and in the hallway, traces were found in the bedroom. The blood wasn't concentrated. In the middle of this stain was an irregular watery shape. A similar trace was found on the bedding. But why would the perpetrator want to dilute the blood without completely removing it? Was this a planned action intended to mislead investigators? At that moment, the detectives weren't sure, but many things didn't add up. So that day, there was probably a break-in. Jennifer was attacked and transported to her minivan. Here the trail went cold. It's unknown whether the perpetrator drove away and then returned the car, or if Jennifer tried to escape on her own, but something happened. And this was the biggest problem with the investigation. There were 2 sets of keys to the minivan. One set was in the drawer, and the other in Jennifer's purse. There were no fingerprints on them. Later that same day, on the evening of November 13th, one of the investigators formulated a theory. Because so many elements didn't form a coherent whole, he suspected that this crime scene had been staged. The amount of blood suggested that the person who was shot could have died if she wasn't given help quickly. The murder weapon wasn't found. A gun was likely used for the attack. The Blagg family home was searched, and a collection of weapons was found in the attic. But each of these weapons was covered with a thick layer of dust, suggesting that none of them had been used for the attack. During another search, A different trace was found, but it wasn't clear if it was connected to this case. Right next to Abby's room was Michael's office. In this office, under the computer on the carpet, a round stain was found. Tests couldn't confirm it 100%, but it was probably semen. Cadaver dogs and blood-tracking dogs were brought to the Blagg family home. 2 dogs indicated the same places: the master bedroom where the attack occurred and the garage. But the trail went cold there, and the dogs couldn't pick it up again. Michael was taken in for questioning at that time, and during his testimony, he said he last saw his wife around 6 a.m. The woman was sleeping when he was getting ready for work, and when he left around 6, she was still asleep. She was supposed to get up half an hour later and start getting Abby ready for school. After leaving the house, Michael drove his car to work. He spent the day at work, which many co-workers confirmed, and his behavior didn't raise suspicions. The man called his wife at 7:05, then at 10 and 1 p.m. In conversation with co-workers, he expressed his concerns and said his wife wasn't answering. Despite his growing nervousness, it didn't occur to him to call Abby's school and find out if the girl had made it to class. Here's a fragment of the conversation between the investigator and Michael. The investigator said, "So tell me about your wife, Jennifer." To which Michael replied, "She's the most energetic, enthusiastic, and wonderful woman anyone could ever meet. She's a good Christian, a warm and loving woman. She's short, has short hair, brown eyes, and is charming. Everyone she talks to immediately becomes her friend. She could talk to anyone." After officially ending the interrogation, which lasted several hours, Michael suddenly asked the investigator if he could ask him a few questions. He asked what the chances were that Jennifer was alive. To this, the investigator replied, "I think there's a good possibility. My question is, why would you think she's not alive?" And then Michael said, "Because of the blood. I saw a lot of blood. I've never seen so much blood in my life. And it scared me. Jennifer is my life. I love my daughter, but my wife comes first. And it's hard for me to come to terms with what happened. So my question is, what can I do? Where can I go?" During the second interrogation, Michael was asked to describe what he was wearing that day. His locker at work was searched, and his clothes were checked for the presence of blood or other traces, but nothing suspicious was found. Jennifer had many friends, and even more acquaintances. All these people were interviewed by the investigation. Jennifer's diary was found, expecting it to provide valuable clues. After talking with investigators and searching the diary, it became clear that Jennifer wasn't as happy as everyone assumed. The head of the family, Michael Blagg, seemed to have everything under control when it came to family. But Jennifer didn't feel fulfilled. She described the crisis in the marriage that appeared from time to time. So Michael became the main suspect. He was placed under surveillance, and 2 months later, in January 2002, a camera recorded him stealing a paper shredder and a table. The theft occurred at his workplace, and the total value of these items was over $500. The family computer, which was in Michael's office, was confiscated, and thousands of photos and videos depicting violent pornography were found. Michael explained that he and Jennifer were raised sheltered, and as Christians wanted to educate themselves in the office, so they downloaded these materials for educational purposes. These materials were supposed to be shown during a meeting of the faithful, but that didn't happen. They probably served Michael's private purposes. After finding these videos, Colorado authorities contacted the investigators and informed them that Jennifer and Abby had appeared at their office shortly before their disappearance, with Jennifer demanding to meet with the authorities. Her mother confirmed that the woman wanted to leave her controlling husband and had scheduled a meeting with a lawyer for this purpose. Areas within many miles of the Blagg family home were searched, but no traces were found. The family offered a $3,000 reward for anyone who could provide important information. Soon, one of Michael's co-workers contacted the police. The man claimed that on the day Jennifer and Abby disappeared, Michael was throwing out a trash bag at work. The co-worker found this strange at the time. Michael worked as an engineer, and taking out the trash wasn't part of his job duties. Other employees testified that they saw Michael pushing a cart with pallets containing 2 large cardboard boxes. He was then said to have thrown these boxes into a large trash bin next to the compactor. His co-workers saw that the man was having trouble tossing these boxes into the bin because they seemed heavy, so they offered help, but Michael refused, which they found odd. Another search took place in April 2002, but nothing was found then. In May 2002, they began searching landfills for bodies. Thousands of volunteers came forward offering their help. The search was conducted with the help of search dogs, mounted officers, and helicopters. Again, no trace was found. 2 days after the start of these searches, Michael left Colorado without informing the investigators. This was an offense because the man was officially treated as a suspect and couldn't leave the state. At that time, he went to his mother's house in Georgia. In June 2002, a month after the landfill searches, the owner of an escort agency informed investigators that Michael had regularly used her services. In June 2002, investigators reached the place where trash from Michael's workplace was transported. Jennifer's body was found then. The woman had been shot. She was shot at close range in the left eye, and the bullet was still lodged in her skull. She probably died in her sleep. On the same day, Michael was arrested in Georgia and transported to Colorado. He was charged with first-degree murder, but regarding Abby, his daughter, no charges were filed because no traces suggesting the girl had been killed or any others indicating she had been kidnapped were found. After the arrest in June, it was revealed that almost half a year earlier, in February 2002, Michael had attempted suicide. After adult films were found on his hard drive, he tried to slit his wrists in his home. He was found and saved by investigators who were supposed to take him in for questioning. A Bible, a photo of Abby and Jennifer, and a note containing one sentence were found with him. "I did not kill my wife and daughter." In December 2002, Michael was released from jail after posting a $500,000 bail. He was transferred to his mother's home in Georgia and awaited trial, which began in March 2004. The official charges were first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and 2 counts of theft. The thefts occurred after Jennifer's murder, and the prosecution decided to combine these 2 cases. According to the prosecution, the man killed his wife because she wanted a divorce. The defense, however, claimed that there was a break-in and an unknown perpetrator attacked Jennifer. Blood traces suggested that the murder could have occurred before Michael left for work, meaning he must have killed his wife and daughter and then transported their bodies to the trash bin at his workplace. The daughter, as suggested then, was murdered by strangulation, but this information couldn't be confirmed because the body wasn't found. The evidence presented by the prosecution was largely circumstantial. The most important lead was that Jennifer's body was found in the landfill, and Michael was seen throwing out large boxes. No traces of Michael or the murder weapon were found at the crime scene. Despite the lack of much evidence, Michael was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The man appealed the court's decision 4 years later, in 2008, but his appeal was rejected. In 2014, the verdict was overturned because one of the jury members lied during jury selection. The lie was about memories and experiences related to domestic violence, and according to regulations, such a lie could influence the juror's decision, so the trial had to be nullified and a new one organised. In 2018, Michael was again found guilty and sentenced to the same punishment: life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the second trial, the defence suggested that Abby was the target of the attack. The perpetrator wanted to kidnap the girl, but wasn't focused on Jennifer, so decided to shoot her. Officially, due to lack of other evidence, Abby Blagg is still considered a missing person. Now, in 2024, she would be 29 years old. Age progression images are released and updated every few years, but there's a lot of evidence suggesting that Abby Blagg is not alive. Michael still maintains that he is innocent. I'm really curious to hear what you think about this case because it's not straightforward. A lot of people believe Michael is innocent, and there are several reasons for that. For one, neither the murder weapon nor any traces of Michael were found at the crime scene. It also looks like everything was meticulously planned and the house was cleaned up afterward. So, I'm eager to hear your thoughts. If you have your own theories, feel free to share them in the comments. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for sticking with me till the end of this podcast. Catch you in the next one. Take care.